This is From the Courtroom to the Boardroom, the podcast for the next generation of legal leaders with me, Simon Gibson. I was a lawyer for 13 years until I walked away from legal practice and entered the world of business. I'm now CEO of the Spirant Group and I lead a portfolio of businesses in the UK and Australia. On this upbeat podcast, I tackle the big issues facing law firms and businesses alike with the help of intriguing guests. Are you ready to rewrite the script? Then it's great to have you along for the ride. Hello friends, welcome to the podcast. Hope you're well. Whenever we see a table of professions and businesses who experience the highest stress and pressure, the legal sector is always close to the top. So why is that? Well, as lawyers, we're under pressure on many fronts. There are billing targets to hit. There are high client expectations, career progression aspirations. And also we constantly need to be right. We need to be correct in terms of the advice we give. That'd make anyone feel overwhelmed. And you throw kids, family, relationships, finances into the mix, and it's not hard to see why many legal professionals feel burnt out. Well, in this episode, we'll be discussing the causes of this, strategies to improve well-being, and the longer-term solutions, focusing on prevention rather than the cure. I want to understand whether the pressure for constant high performance is always a bad thing, or whether there are circumstances when our pushing ourselves to our limits should be encouraged. Now, I'm delighted to welcome a very special guest to help us in this discussion, who is Charlène Giselle. Charlène is a high-performance coach who specializes in working with legal professionals. As a former lawyer herself, Charlène has developed expertise in getting lawyers reaching their full performance potential, whilst also ensuring they keep well physically and mentally. Charlene's got a proven track record of success. She's worked with the leaders in some of the biggest law firms in the world, and she's a recognized expert speaker in these important areas. So without further ado, welcome to this episode of From the Courtroom to the Boardroom, which is all about preventing burnout whilst driving high performance. Here's Charlène Giselle. Charlène, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you.
And well, the pleasure's all ours. Now, you've had a very interesting story to date encompassing the legal profession before, of course, you've moved into your career as a high-performance coach working with lawyers and law firms. So tell us a bit more about what your career has looked like so far.
Of course. Well, I started my career as a litigator. Perhaps I could start even at an older date than that. I wanted to be a lawyer from as far back as I remember. I wanted to be a litigator, and I did just that, joined my dream law firm, and I couldn't be happier with that career move and really loved being a lawyer. Up until the point where one of the reasons I wanted to be a lawyer was seeing my dad being so successful, and he had a burnout-induced heart attack, and that made me really reconsider my own ways of working and whether or not we were working in sustainable ways.
What did you conclude in terms of your own career? Did you conclude that it was sustainable or that you needed to make some changes?
I needed to make some changes. Because one thing that I realized was that although I was extremely well trained in the art of law and litigation through my studies and going to law school and joining a top law firm, I had some serious gaps in my learning, and I take full responsibility for that. I did not fully understand the importance of self-care. I was not particularly well versed in the art of setting boundaries, and you add a bit of professional perfectionism and type A tendencies and ultra commitment and a dash of extra conscientiousness, and you have a burnt out equation.
I mean, I can resonate with a number of those things. So did your philosophy around finding that balance between perfectionism but also looking after yourself, was it to find that balance and to help others find that balance that led you to depart your legal career and set out on this new journey as a high-performance coach?
It is, absolutely. I went on a journey, but my mission was not just to heal myself. It was very much to serve the legal industry in a different capacity. One of the reasons I wanted to embark on that mission is because back when I was a lawyer, I found that there was a real gap between law and wellness, in the sense that the only kind of wellness offering that were available to me back then were, your regular yoga or gym or workout or healthy luncheon. And although those are well and good and fantastic for law firms to offer that. I'm not criticizing those initiatives at all. I don't think they're enough because they don't go deep into the mindset. They don't go deep into the habits and behavior that you embrace day to day. And that's really where the difference lies, when you have optimized habits before you go into work, optimized habit after you do this work, because you are a high performer. When you want to handle 80, 90, 100 hours a week, right, you need to have a level of self-care that is actually extraordinary so that you can sustain that level of workload. And my mission was really to understand what my blind spots were, B, optimize my performance and wellness so that I could sustain that level of energy, and C, really translate that message to the legal industry in a way that was not too woo-woo, not too sentimental, not too fluffy, so that they could land in with high-performing lawyer.
I've read a number of your articles, really enjoyed them. One of them made a very interesting comparison between the legal profession and professional sport, which surprised me a little bit at the start. But when I read on, I got where you were coming from. Just tell the audience where you see that similarity and perhaps what the causes of burnout or adverse well-being are in both of those very different walks of life.
Thanks, Simon. Great question. Well, I've observed the similarity when we think about elite performance, right? One of the reasons athletes go and become the elite performers that they are and make it to the Olympics and get a gold medal is because they work on their skills, absolutely, and they have talents, but they add the mindset element to it. And that's really the difference between the good and the great athlete, right? With the same level of skill set, but an optimized mindset, that really makes a difference. And I observed the difference between lawyers that are fantastic, but don't last because they burn out and they can't sustain the workload, and lawyers that are fantastic and really highly trained and highly skilled, but they sustain the distance. And I noticed that the big difference between the two was the mindset, was that mindset of the resilient athlete, of knowing that you need to get the support, knowing that you need to treat your body as part and parcel of what will enable you to perform well, right? If you're operating with lack of sleep, poor nutrition, stress snacking, not optimizing movement, you're actually going to have a knock-on impact on your brain, which is the number one organ that you need to perform as a lawyer. That's going to have an impact on your body as well. If you are crippled with aches and pains and lower back pain and shoulder pain and neck pain, how are you going to perform in court? How are you going to perform in the office? All of this have an impact. At first, we may not look at it. And very often when I work with lawyers, the mindset is, it's work first, billable hours first, target hours first, then I'll care about my health and well-being when I have time, if I have time. And this is perhaps a bit bleak, but this is the hard truth, Simon. A lot of the time, that later or that when I have time doesn't happen, because most of my clients start to consult with me because they've had a health care, they just had a diagnosis, or they were so unwell that they couldn't cope with the work anymore. And that is so unfortunate.
It is, because if you think about that menu of opportunities or areas of our life we've got to positively influence our well-being, you mentioned sleep, nutrition, exercise. It is within our control to a very large extent, isn't it? And it is a shame that there's something about the legal profession that we seem to be hardwired as we go through our academia and the early part of our training to think that long hours, food on the go, no real opportunities to exercise, high pressure billable hours, demands from clients. The other thing which always seems to me is the additional pressure of being a lawyer is it's expected that we're always right, so that our advice is always right. So you mentioned this issue of perfectionism. Well, there must be very few professions where being perfect is almost considered a given, and that adds additional stress.
I love that you brought that up. I remember having night terrors about typos and anxieties, the sort of proofreading and the importance, because it is important. And as a lawyer, and I don't mean just a typo in terms of grammar, but this level of perfection when you're sending that document to the client or to the other side. You can't afford not to have it be perfect. And if there was a typo, it would be the end of your career, and you start to go into catastrophic thinking. And I remember being crippled by fears of having not done it well enough, although my performance was really great. And when I hear clients nowadays, at the end of the day, at night, they have a really great tendency to go, well, I didn't do this, and I didn't do that, and that was not good, and that was not great. And actually, it takes so much time and effort to dive in deeper and uncover the things that I did do well, because there were plenty, but I just completely overlooked them. And that's because of the lawyer's brain, right? The lawyer's brain is a gift, but it's also a curse. It's a gift because we're so attentive to details, we're solution orientated, we have high service to our client, we know how to find solution and troubleshoot, but it's a curse because we can be a little obsessive at times with reaching perfection, which is frankly unattainable, but also a curse because it's never enough, it's never good enough.
That's right. You mentioned there, of course, your current work with clients. So let's just touch upon that. So you made this brave decision to move away from a successful legal career. I made that myself, which we'll perhaps have the opportunity to touch on a bit later. But I know you've worked with some of the biggest law firms in the world, and you're an acclaimed speaker on these key issues of balancing high performance with good personal wellness. What does your business look like now? What is it you do with clients? What's your program?
I work on multiple levels. I like to think of wearing 3 hats. My number 1 hat is as a wellness consultant and burnout advisor to law firms. So that means I will work directly with the heads of learning and development, with HR team, and with managing partners as well, to roll out, strategize, and implement well-being strategies and performance strategy across the firm. So that typically is firm-wide, and we typically do it at multiple level, multi-tiers approach, whereby we do trainees, associate partners, and business service providers as well, or we do all firm-based initiatives. The second hat that I wear is that of a coach, meaning that I do the one-to-one session. So typically we work with law firms that want to give their fee earners or business service providers extra level of support, and that's where I would come in and give that coaching. And the third hat is very much as a keynote speaker, whereby again law firms will interact with me and ask me to deliver keynotes for offsite events, partners retreat, leadership development retreat, partner development program.
Well, I can see how, but it's quite clear from your track record how successful you are in all of those areas. I was very interested about the comment you made about you can work direct with the business alongside HR or learning and development. How do you do that? Because if you're working with a large number of people, surely within the team there will be already different spectrums in where they are in terms of their personal wellness or their performance at the given point when you start to work with them. So is it one where you have to apply different strategies to different team members, or is there a certain joined up approach which you think should work for everyone?
I don't really believe in one size fits all. And that's one of the reasons more than ever I don't tend to offer as many plug and play options because I really love working on a white glove, really bespoke approach. There is the importance of respecting the culture of the specific firm that I work with. Working with law firms is one thing, but each firm has a different culture. I like to think of firms like individual, right? We all have personalities, and I really firmly believe that each firm has a strong personality. And I like to live and breathe the firm that I work in. So before I would deliver a workshop, I really like to spend time with the team, spend time with the HR lead, spend time with L&D, so I get a feel with what is the pain point, what is keeping the fee earners up at night, what is keeping a firm strategy and leaders and managing partners up at night, and I can understand. If I know the pain points, I can offer the solution. So once I have a very clear idea of where I'm going and the kind of problems I'm navigating, then I can curate a solution that would feel entirely bespoke to that specific firm and that specific team. And then within the firm, there are of course different teams, and each different team also has a different personality, which you need to get very good at being acquainted with if you want your message to be impactful.
Yeah, and it's good that you do have that opportunity to become familiar with not just the individuals, but with the culture, because I have to say that really resonated with me, because I mean, we've made some investments in wellness in our business. I think perhaps we've got some things right and some things wrong. We have done the usual of giving free gym membership, access to health cover. I think one thing which did work quite well is we brought a therapist in-house who worked with our team, particularly through COVID lockdown. So that was a good investment. But I must admit, I know other law firms who they seem to view their employees' personal wellness as something which just isn't their lookout. What words have you got for any law firms who are watching or listening who are maybe taking that view? Are there benefits to the business in encouraging a balance of high performance with personal wellness?
Well, frankly, Simon, I'm not too sure that many law firms think that way anymore. I think perhaps they did before the pandemic, but it's become a bit of an industry standard and a worldwide standard with the promotion of ESG and the importance that the whole world places on well-being and performance. I don't think this is a nice to have or a fluffy and sentimental exercise. It's the heart and soul of the law firm. If your fee earners are not thriving, how can they perform? And if we bring about the underwriters of law firms, and we talk in very sort of, bottom line terms, there is very strong evidence to show that fee earners that are burning out or really struggling with anxiety and mental health are more likely to make mistakes, are more likely to quit, are more likely to jump ship, are more likely to go to another firm that would provide more of a wellness solution and will prioritize their performance and their long-term sustainable pace as well. Law firms are not spa. I'm not at all suggesting that. And of course, one should be willing and wanting to work hard and to prioritize our career. But I really don't believe that it's an either-or situation. And I believe that the firms that I work with, and one of the reasons why I have such a strong relationship with the firms that I work with, is they are fundamentally in agreement that it's not a question of workload or health or performance or well-being. It's a question of and wellness and performance, health and billing hours. And when you add the and in the equation and you really deeply understand that those two should live concurrently and are not mutually exclusive, then you get stellar performance and brilliant team, and you minimize the amount of attrition and you minimize the amount of people turning over and people going to other firms or even worse, leaving the legal profession altogether, which we see all too often. I really see a huge shift in the law firm's mindset in that sense, and I have to say the clients that I work with are fully versed in the importance of well-being for their people.
And I mean, particularly with the recruitment and the retention problems that are occurring for all businesses at the moment, if there is a law firm which is listening, or indeed a lawyer who's listening who believes this is an area for an opportunity to improve, we've got all of your links in the description of the podcast, links to your website, links to your socials. So can they just reach out to you directly for a chat?
Absolutely, yes.
Excellent. Well, I would urge everyone to do that. Let me just share you a bit of my own backstory, Charlène. I
would love that.
I was a lawyer for many years. I was an equity partner in a law firm, and unfortunately, I had a relationship breakdown with my business partner, which led to me eventually demerging from that practice and basically the business split. And it was an incredibly tough 12 or 18 months. It wasn't just that there was a relationship issue. When there are problems in the workplace, it filters down to all of the team. And it was an incredibly difficult time because it was emotionally driven, but there was still hard work to be done. There were negotiations going on. And I found it incredibly difficult. I did neglect my well-being during the period. I certainly experienced high levels of stress and anxiety. I think I underestimated the impact it had on me because I didn't seek any sort of formal closure or any sort of help or discussion or counseling after it was over. I just tried to keep working at 100 miles an hour on what was effectively my new business. And it took me quite a few years to work out that I really just needed to find some closure and to prioritize things other than work. But you know what? It's a funny one because it was an awful period. It really was. But I'm quite grateful for it now, insofar as the fact that I was resilient enough to be able to push myself to my physical and psychological boundaries for a period of time, I think is a key reason why I was able to progress my career to where I am now. So it's funny, I feel like it was a great experience for me, even though it was so awful at the time. I thought it was character building, it was resilience building. I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate here. Is there any danger that in presenting the argument that wellness is key, which I do agree with, but is there any danger that we discourage people from pushing themselves to their full extent, and that in doing that, we might restrict them reaching their full potential?
I think that's a great question, and particularly one that is hyper relevant when we think about generational conflict. I think definitely, without wanting to point any fingers at any generation per se, there is a tendency nowadays, and again, just not wanting to make too broad or too wide a generalization, there is a tendency to navigate a little bit towards excessive use of wellness as a pushback to ultra level of commitment to hard work. And one of the reasons I know that is very often when I work with top partners, equity partners, managing partners, they do have some struggles with the management of their trainees because the trainees are more demanding of their level of self-care and wellness and are actually setting very strong boundaries. And when I think back about my days as a trainee, I would have never dreamed of saying some of the things that they say to partners and their level of pushback. No, I won't do that because I'm booked in for X, Y, and Z. Look, this is a whole different conversation and one that is very, very valuable. And is it deterrent to growing resiliency? I don't think so. But is it worth asking what you really want and what is the purpose? That is perhaps a really valuable question. So the work that I do with trainees that perhaps don't display the level of commitment is I do really a value exercise. So how do you see your career progress? Are you cruising, so to speak, and just sort of dipping your toes in the water, but not really fully committed to swim? Or are you genuinely committed, but want to maintain strict boundaries, which that is awesome because that's the way to go to keep a sustainable career. But you do have to show a level of commitment and accept that there will be tough nights and there will be tough days. And again, going back to the athlete, an athlete that's not willing to train hard is probably not going to make it to the Olympic Games. Let's be blatantly honest. So I'm all about sustainability. I'm all about hard rest, but I'm also all about hard work. I think the equation is very much hard work, hard rest, right? That is sports science approved. You can have really intense period of stress with very strong period of adequate recovery, and that leads to sustainable growth. If you have very intense of stress with zero recovery, that's going to lead to burnout. But if you have not enough stress with a lot of recovery, with nothing to recover from, that's probably not going to lead you to growth either. So there has to be that sweet spot, and also a deep understanding that stress is not something to run away from. Stress is healthy as long as it's followed by adequate recovery. Stress will give you the drive, the motivation, the resilience that you clearly displayed and explained to us in such a beautiful way that we need. We want to have a healthy dose of stress in our life. And if not, then the legal profession is probably not the right one.
Well, do you know what? That you summed that up so well. I mean, I do agree with you that stress can be a very positive period because, I mean, it's well known that when we're stressed, we are also learning fast. We're in a period of intense learning. I think there's probably something evolutionary about that when we used to, hunt for our food, when we were stressed, it was quite often that we were in a situation where we could find food at some personal risk. But what I would say to anyone is that when you've reached, I'm 45 now, and when you've reached middle age, I've got to admit it, and when you've reached middle age, I find it easier now to recognize periods of stress and struggle as part of a process. And as long as I can acknowledge that it won't feel like that forever, as long as I keep moving forward towards the objective that I'm seeking to achieve, and as long as I can view as part of that objective some form of reward, rest, financial reward, more family time, personal issue, whatever it might be, it's so important to keep going and not turn our back on periods where resilience is required.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Resilience is key to sustained growth.
It certainly is. You're not going to get a big bicep by staying out the gym, are you?
Not at all. Let's go and flex those resilience muscles.
So, Charlène, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. As I said, all of your links are in the description to the podcast. It's clear as well, if people check out your website, all of your articles are on there, which I had such a fun time reading through, and all of your success stories as well. One final question before I let you go. I heard you talking about nutrition, which is not something we've been able to touch on today. But you were talking about eating pigs' noses or animal noses. What's that all about?
Oh, that's a funny thing to throw into the equation for today's conversation. You really caught me by surprise, Simon. I like it. Oh, I'm a primal kind of girl when it comes to nutrition. I very much follow a bit of a hunter-gatherer diet. I don't like to use the word diet, but what I mean by that is lifestyle, perhaps. And it really stems from my mother. She, she was a busy mom. We're a big family. I'm one out of four. And she really believed in feeding us organ meat from a very early age. So we were eating what's called nose to tail. Yeah. So the meat, but also, doing bone broth and eating the liver and eating all the different organs and all the different cuts that are often called the offals, right? Because they're somewhat less desirable, but they're actually very nutritious. And I jokingly and lovingly say that I'm very grateful that my mom fed me lamb brain growing up, and I have a lot of crediting to do, and I think that my successful career and my abilities have a lot to do with the way that my mother nourished me when I was little. So there you go, that's the story.
Well, I'm sure you are, and we had a bit of a laugh there, but I mean, just to finish on this point, nutrition is one area that's completely within your control. I've had a crack at keto a few times, which obviously is very heavily meat driven. I find it tough to sustain, but I view that more as lack of discipline on my part, because the diet does work if you commit to it. And of course, one of the things you've touched on many times in your work is that having good nutrition, nutritious food, steering clear of the things which we know doesn't help our wellness is a key part of our well-being, but also it drives great performance. And that, on that note, it's clear from your work, Charlène, and certainly your work speaks for itself, that you do drive high performance in the lawyers that you work with, whilst balancing off, of course, the issue of high personal wellness. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have your company today, Charlène. Thanks so much for doing this, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Likewise, Simon. It's been a pleasure.